You convince yourself every day that your choices are freely made, yet your life unfolds on rails someone else built. Freedom is your most comforting delusion. Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher who shattered illusions about morality and selfhood. But look closer at what he's pointing to, the weight of the collective pressing into your every decision. There's a reason that most people who break rank feel that rush of both terror and exhilaration. It isn't a minor discomfort or just occasional friction. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he laid it bare. The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. That is the daily struggle you barely notice, camouflaged as 1,000 tiny compromises. Most mornings you outsource your values, matching words, clothes, even the rhythm of your ambitions to the people around you. The cost? You lose the raw edges of your convictions, trading rough authenticity for group safety. This isn't just about explicit peer pressure. It's an internalized drill sergeant barking orders from behind your eyes. Over time, it worms inside your head until the separating line between your voice and the crowds is a blur. And what happens if you stay under that current for too long? In The Dawn, the philosopher sharpened the warning. The surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently. Conformity becomes sanctified. Difference becomes a liability. At first, it feels like belonging. Eventually, it calcifies into a mental cage. The strangest ideas feel radioactive, even if they have your own handwriting on them. You might recognize them only as discomfort, a flinch, a thought quickly sidestepped. That fear of standing naked, opinion exposed, unprotected by numbers, is a paralysis all its own. Inside, you're rationing selfhood piece by piece, afraid you'll run out of excuses if you stop obeying. The philosopher isn't just theorizing here. He's describing a subtle violence that reshapes you before you ever notice the wound. You wake up compliant and wonder why fulfillment always feels second-hand, as though happiness belonged to someone braver. The stakes are existential. Every silent surrender is a new link in the chain you'll later call your fate. Most people never see the bars. They call them the supports that hold up civilized life. But he dares us to look harder. To ask who benefits when thinking differently is pathologized, not celebrated. The tribe offers you comfort as payment, but charges you your originality in return. Now the walls start closing in, not suddenly, just steadily. You become your own jailer, enforcing rules you never questioned. The philosopher targets this exact moment. When you align out of habit, not conviction, patterns of thought solidify with each silent compromise. Ordinary anxieties disguise a more profound terror, the loss of your why. Anxiety turns into chronic indecision, then into resignation. The real cost becomes clear. You're safe, but you're not awake. You try to change course, but you've bartered agency for approval so often that the original price is untraceable. The philosopher investigates this transaction like an existential forensics report. Who set the terms? Why did you accept them? Each step away from your own judgment is another toward a life no longer fully yours. In Twilight of the Idols, he makes his point with brutal clarity. He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. These words are a jolt meant to rattle you out of resignation. Here's the memorable line, the turn everything hinges on. You will die in a cage built by your own concessions if you never risk declaring your why. Pause on that discomfort. Has your routine narrowed into ritual? Has your personality become a curated echo chamber, acceptable, predictable, safe? There's no tyrant in the shadows, only the agreements you keep making with your own uneasiness. Somewhere, buried under habit, is the first difference you were afraid to declare. That's where the invisible cage began to take shape. The philosopher is merciless here. He refuses to romanticize the cost of safety. If you never let your ideas stretch beyond their allowed perimeter, you may never truly encounter yourself. You might confuse constraint for stability, mistaking containment for wisdom. Will you ever recover the unnamed possibilities sacrificed so quietly in the name of not being alone? Maybe you've confused fitting in with actually belonging. The tribe applauds subtle obedience, but it will never hand you a reason to live. That search must begin at the point where your discomfort peaks. The only real freedom is earned at the frontier between fear and honesty. In Beyond Good and Evil, this philosopher pushes much further, stripping away our most comfortable delusions. In individuals, insanity is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epics, it is the rule. The page doesn't blink. Look around. Conformity shields you from blame, but chains you to collective moods that spiral out of reason. You yield your edge for acceptance and end up lost in the roar of consensus. That's when the invisible cage tightens, not from external bars or visible guards, but from the daily necessity of pretending you agree with what robs you. The line between safety and suffocation blurs bit by bit. The longer you tame your difference, the more distant your own motives become, until you can't tell if the life you inhabit is actually yours. It's not just psychological. Social conventions, a code unspoken, but copper-wired into every gesture, sink their teeth deeper with every nod. Rituals pile up, the polite laugh, the careful silence, the unclaimed want. Eventually, every conversation becomes half performance. Internal revolt simmers, but you learn to smile through it. What you lose is subtle but fatal. With each small surrender, the ability to set your own direction weakens. The inner voice gets quieter, drowned out by demands to be reasonable, to not make waves. This isn't just weakness. At its worst, it is a learned reliance on external validation, a belief that fitting the form means being free. He would call this self-betrayal masquerading as maturity. But the philosopher doesn't invite you to chaos. He demands you step beyond the gathered crowd, past fear masquerading as reason. The internal switch flips when you admit what you've denied. The deep anxiety isn't about social rejection, but the terror of realizing you have never lived for yourself. In this reckoning, comfort transforms from sanctuary into trap. For the first time, the desperation to conform feels suffocating, not protective. What you stand to reclaim isn't comfort, but direction, a raw contact with will, untuned by others' preferences. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he hurls down the final imperative: become who you are. The difference is unmistakable. This is not an invitation to drift, but a call to action, to break the habits that partition you from yourself and to step out of the invisible cage. If that urge surfaces now, it is because, on the other side of safety, every risk might finally matter. Breaking free from conformity reveals the true essence of personal freedom. This thinker emphasizes the necessity of living authentically and reclaiming your direction. If this resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and comment below. What have you been denying in pursuit of safety?